Well guys, it's officially 2023 and you may be asking yourself, is this the year that I purchase a home? What's up guys, it's McKeown back again with another video this week. It's not gonna be a super long one here for you guys. I just wanna educate you a little bit of what I'm seeing in the real estate market and whether or not it makes sense for you to be purchasing a house this year. So the first question I have for you guys is, do you rent or do you own? And if you've been watching my content or following me for a while, you know, and this is not just because I'm a realtor, a lot of people will post content online basically saying buy a house because I'm a realtor and that's how I get paid. I'm a firm believer in being transparent and showing you guys that in 5.5 years, I've been able to accrue north of $5 million in real estate, and about half of that is actually what I only owe. So I owe roughly about $2.5 million on that $5 million. The other 2.5 is either from forced appreciation, from some kind of appreciation just over time, with my market in the Dallas-Fort Worth area really taking off in the last 5 years, and then just purchasing the right type of home at the right time. So if you are a homeowner, it's probably gonna make a little less sense to purchase in 2023 than if you are a renter. I would highly advise that you purchase sooner rather than later. Now the reason being here is not because I want to earn a commission check. Again, full transparency, I purchased my first home the minute I could. I actually tried purchasing homes before I even officially could. Even dating back to when I went to graduate school in Texas, I wanted to purchase a house and rent out the rooms when I was in college, when I didn't even understand the entire process of purchasing a home. I didn't even have a job to be able to truly buy a home, but I had the mindset of being able to purchase a home with the intent of it generating some type of income for myself. But again, this is a case-by-case scenario. If you are an individual that's married with a handful of kids and you are barely making it paycheck by paycheck, probably not going to be able to purchase a home in 2023 unless you find a new way to make ends work. What I can tell you, if you are a single or an individual that is dating someone, maybe single in your 20s or 30s, I would buy a house and rent out the rooms. On the flip side, you could certainly use an FHA loan or even a VA loan and house hack a multifamily, whether or not that be a duplex with your FHA loan or a triplex or a quad or even a duplex with your VA loan. This is a great way to get into a property for a low amount down. Yes, rates are unfortunately a little bit higher than they were last year, but I can tell you there are some good news. We're actually down to interest rates roughly about where they were at September. They climbed to a peak in October, really the end of October, and then started to fall a little bit towards the beginning of November. Once we started to hear some finally good news on inflation, and actually again in December when we got back-to-back months of positive information when it comes to the consumer price index. Now, if you do own a house already, or maybe you own multiple properties, and you're looking potentially to purchase again in 2023, this is gonna be a little bit more difficult scenario for you. Obviously, you're likely gonna be going from a lower interest rate to a higher interest rate if you purchase in 2023. Now, none of us can obviously tell you where interest rates will be next month or where they're gonna be at the middle or end of 2023. But the great news is if you do buy a house now, there's always the option to refinance down the road. But the good news with higher interest rates is there's gonna be a far less demand for homes than there was, let's say, maybe about 6-7 months ago in the middle of the summer of 2022, where we just saw ridiculously low interest rates and a ton of people paying outrageous prices for homes. Now, it's not to say that purchasing a home in 2022 was an absolute disaster. Here in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, we're only down 10% from the peak in June or July of this year. We're actually even still 10% above where we were just at the beginning of 2022. So if you look at where home prices went from the beginning of 2022 to the middle of 2022, we're talking about a 20% increase in prices, which is just astronomical for a span of 6 months. But again, if you purchased a house in 2022, I always tell people, if you're purchasing a house, do not purchase a house with an intent to really sell it in a year or two, or maybe 6 months, 3 years. I honestly tell people, buy a house knowing that you're gonna be living there for at least 3 to 5 years. And even if you did this in the middle of 2022, at the very, very peak, you're gonna be just fine within 3 to 5 years. Now, the next situation that you may find yourself in is relocating. I'm actually dealing with a Marine vet that I was stationed with back in 2009. I actually helped him buy a house at the beginning of 2020. He's gonna wind up being in a good position selling his house in the Dallas-Fort Worth market here just at the beginning of 2023, but he is relocating to a completely different state. He's actually looking at houses in his new market, which is a little bit more expensive and a little bit more demand just for the lack of sheer inventory that they have in his new market. But it makes sense to be able to apply the equity that I made in this house as a down payment for his next house. Now, one thing about relocating is oftentimes, and us realtors don't really enjoy them, there are relocation companies. These relocation companies can actually incentivize you to relocate from one metro and one area to another area and really cover all of your costs. I mean, we're talking the costs of selling your home, also the costs of transferring your belongings and all the accommodations that come along with it, moving to your next area. And I can tell you that's the exact situation that this gentleman is going through. So it's really not costing him anything to relocate to a new market. It's actually not even costing him technically anything to sell his home or even buy his new home because it's all covered through the relocation company. So if you are renting, it may make sense to buy. Again, I'm a little biased. I'm a firm believer in purchasing investment properties by living in them. Second of all, if you're relocating, it certainly could make sense to purchase rather than rent, especially if you're going to be there more than 3 to 5 years. And lastly, the question may be you asking yourself in 2023, is this the year that I purchase an investment property? Now, I personally can tell you, I am closing on a property on January 18th. This was a new construction property in another state that I don't live in Florida, and I actually contracted this back in about August or September of 2022. What I can tell you is when I initially contracted that home, the rates were not necessarily as great as what I have gotten previously, but they actually continued to rise over the next couple months and really got me to the point where I was paying north of $5,000 more a year just in interest alone. Well, fortunately enough, through November and December, there was great news when it comes to inflation. Inflation has kind of teetered down from its peak this summer, and we month by month have been doing better on that end, as well as much better when it comes to the consumer price index, just the overall cost of goods. So I was fortunately able to lock my interest rate for that house about a week ago or a week and a half ago, where interest rates really were the lowest since they had been, maybe since August or September when I first contracted that home. But after all of that, I'm still looking at an interest rate between a low 6 or low 7. Now I'm electing to go with the low 7% interest rate because I know interest rates are not going to stay this high forever, and there's going to come a point where it makes sense for me to be able to refinance. So I'm taking all the cash with me and not buying down my rate with the intention down the road to be able to refinance that maybe into the 5s. If I'm lucky, maybe the 4s. But right now I'm sitting at that property closing at a low 7% interest rate. So you may be asking, with a low 7% interest rate, does it make sense? Is it going to cash flow? And I can tell you, I actually made a whole video on this talking about how this may be my worst investment property ever. Now, there are a few reasons why. First of all, I'm only putting 10% down, and a majority of what I'm putting down, I'm actually getting back in commission the minute I close and fund on the property. So really, I'm not putting any money down outside of maybe $10,000 or $15,000 for a brand new construction home in Florida that's costing me $400,000. Now, on top of that, because I'm only putting 10% down, I still do have to pay PMI. PMI is private mortgage insurance that you're gonna always pay unless you use your VA loan or you put at least 20% down on a property. As I mentioned before, this is a secondary home for me, or was intended to be a secondary home. So I only had to put 10% down. So for the next 10%, I guess, on that particular property, I'm still gonna be paying PMI. So when you factor in PMI, when you factor in a low 7% interest rate, this is a property, and probably the first property that I purchased, that is truly not going to cash flow. However, when it comes to my real estate portfolio, I've got so much income being generated through all of my properties that I actually need to not necessarily buy a bad property or a non-cash flowing property, but I'm paying taxes on all the income that I generate from my other properties. So this actually helps generate kind of less income or more of an expense to help offset all of the income, and not necessarily all of the income, but some of the income that I'm generating through my other properties. So having one, I guess, bad investment isn't going to kill you if you've got a large enough portfolio. So if you have a larger portfolio, does it make sense to buy in 2023? Sure, you can err maybe towards a property that may not cash flow as great as you want. Now, you're likely going to be putting 20 or 25% down. And if rates continue to go down, you may be getting a better interest rate than I have on this property at a low 7%. So you could certainly be in a good position cash flowing. But I can tell you, if you buy a property as an investment property and cash flows at the interest rates that are currently being, you're in a good spot, because down the road, if interest rates do go down, you're gonna actually even cash flow better, which who's going to be upset about that? However, if you're looking to purchase your first investment property, and with rates where they are, but maybe a market that's a little bit softer, it may make sense to kind of be a little bit more cautious. Make sure that the property that you're purchasing, if it doesn't cash flow, that you have the means and the funds to actually cover that. So for instance, if your mortgage is $2,500, but your rent is only $2,300 or $2,400, meaning you can't even cover fully your entire mortgage, the next question is going to be, hey, is it a 80-year-old home with a ton of deferred maintenance, or is it a brand new home such as my investment property in Florida that I'm really not going to have to pay any money for repairs, hopefully in the next 10, 15 years, because it is a brand new construction home. So do you buy a house in 2023? Obviously, it is a case-by-case situation, and I will tell you, if you are a renter and have the funds and the ability to do so, I highly suggest that you do so. Even if you're an individual that is dating someone or someone that doesn't necessarily love sharing spaces, there are ways that you can purchase a home and really still pay a little bit, possibly, but not pay a ton, or at least the full mortgage, by renting out rooms or renting out the other side of a multifamily home. This is an easy way to get jump started on purchasing a home. The downside is it's not the societal dream house that you purchase as your first home, and it's not beautiful and it's not luxurious, but if you're willing to sacrifice a little bit, I can tell you, just from my experience alone, that purchasing a house and purchasing multiple houses has been the biggest game changer in my life. Thanks again for watching, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe. It really does help, and stay tuned for the next video.